And we are back on the Zero Hour. I am Richard RJ Eskow, and joining us now is Randi Weingarten, president of the American Federation of Teachers. She's been with us before. This time we're on a different topic. Randi, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Richard.
Oh, absolutely. And listen, you've been speaking out lately and writing quite courageously, I would say, on the issue of campus rape, on the issue of not only your own personal experience with it, but why it's important to talk about it, the leadership that's been shown by young activists in this area. And I guess my first question for you would be, why now? Why speak up on this issue now?
It's a question I've asked myself a lot too. Since when something happens 35 years ago, it's a totally legitimate question to ask. So I have been watching the activists because we are a pretty big presence on campus. We are, I think, the largest union representing adjuncts and professors and others, and we've worked with a lot of student groups on the student debt issues, and I've been watching with admiration a lot of the activists saying, no, it's not okay to blame the victim anymore. Rape is a crime, campus rape is a crime, assault is a crime, and survivors should not be brutalized twice. So you do the policy work that we've been doing, like our SUNY union has done with, helping to establish the Bill of Rights in SUNY, or our, activists have done in Michigan to contest the, George Will speaking at the graduation after what he said about women who have been raped. But
right.
When I saw the Rolling Stone magazine issue its retraction, my greatest fear was that would, one more time, create the curtain of silence where young women would be too afraid to share their truth. And that's when I took a deep breath and said, maybe if I share what happened to me so many years ago, and having the same reaction that it was my fault and I should have been smarter, and so many years that it took me to deal with it, that might be helpful, and that's why I did it. And that really that the events after the Rolling Stone retraction, and seeing people, seeing young girls getting scared, young women getting scared again, that curtain of silence can never go down. We need to change the culture on this. And so that's when I said I would, talk about it in the kind of forum that seemed appropriate. And that's why I did this week. Talk about
so you spoke with Senator Gillibrand about this, and you wrote an essay about it. We're speaking with Randi Weingarten, president of the American Federation of Teachers. And I guess one of the questions I would ask is, did you find yourself reliving the emotions of the time because I think as a writer myself, sometimes an advocate myself, sometimes if I speak to long ago painful situations, they come back to me, and maybe that helps us with empathy. But did that happen to you in this process, or did you have some distance now?
It clearly I guess nothing is clear. There's distance. Something that happened 35 years ago, there's a lot of distance from it. But each time I said, I don't intend to relive the experience, of course you relive a piece of the experience. And I think that's why it's been so great to have the kind of avalanche of support that I've gotten. It's ironic in a fantastic way that when you are one of the people who are trying to help others, enable others to experience this level of support that I've gotten has been fantastic. But it's so yes, I've relived a piece of it, but look, it was a long time ago, and I've I've done a lot of work to try to overcome the scarring that I had. But the bottom line is this: think about young women, think about young men who have been raped, who have been assaulted. It should create tremendous empathy that we need to treat these survivors as survivors and help them, move out of their pain and move out of their angst and move out of their agita. And that's what I think a lot of the work that Senator Gillibrand and Senator McCaskill are trying to do, and what these new policies like ETSUNY and CUNY are about. And that's frankly part of what Title IX should be about. Title IX was intended to guarantee a right of education free from sexual violence and free from sexual discrimination. And this is a vulnerable piece of it. It's tough for a lot of us to talk about this, but that's part of what we need to do. We need to eradicate racism. We need to eradicate sexual discrimination. I know it's easier said than done, but it means changing culture.
Well, exactly. And we're speaking with Randi Weingarten of the American Federation of Teachers, and I think that, no pun intended, I do think that this is a teaching moment for the nation in a number of ways, and I think that there have been those who have tried to exploit the, in my opinion, very understandable ambiguities in the student's story in Rolling Stone. I think that there may have been problems with the reporting, but one who has experienced a trauma is not always going to, it's a known fact, and we know that a story may not be clear because the memory shuts down during trauma in certain ways. That said, I do think there is a chance, as you are doing, and that's why I commend you for it, to make it a positive, constructive teaching moment by explaining, first of all, what really happens and the need, and secondly, by, I guess I would say, destigmatizing the experience by sharing stories like yourselves, and I would say thirdly, by allowing those of us who have not experienced this kind of incident to understand how to process the information that's being given to us. First of all, that if you are telling your story, it is your story, not my story to modify or edit. And secondly, to see, well, what can we do constructively? You mentioned Title IX. What other steps do you think either the teaching profession or the educational world in general or society can be doing to minimize the threat of campus rape?
So I think that's a great question, and let me say there's not, you have to first say there's no silver bullet, because the moment you say one or two things, they may work in certain situations, they may not work in other situations. Number one, I think the point you just made about destigmatizing is really important. The more people who have had this happen to them feel a comfort level about saying something about it, the more you can destigmatize and also make it, and also make sure that rape or assault is treated like the crime that it is, and that you support the victims and the survivors. You don't vilify them. You don't make them go through. You don't traumatize them even more than they've been traumatized. So I think you're right, and that's part of what I've hopefully, I'm helping to do by talking about something that's hard to talk about, as I am. So the destigmatizing is really important, and that's about telling stories a lot, and not a person telling stories a lot, but that's about having a lot of stories out there. So you see that, lots of different people have gone through this kind of trauma of sexual assault. That's number one. Number two, teaching is always critical in almost any process, but we have to help train teachers and help make it safe for teachers to talk to students about this. And so when I say that, there's an easy place to do it. We're supposed to have health education classes. We're supposed to have, lots of this, as part of physical education. And with a lot of the austerity and the fixation on testing, there's been much less of a priority about health education. And then there's also the politics around it and the kind of squishiness and squeeze and discomfort around it. because the moment anybody starts talking about sex, if you're a school teacher, if it's not done, if you don't feel safe about it or it's not done properly, a school teacher can get in real trouble for it. And so you see that a lot, which is a real chilling effect. So that's why making it safe to have safe spaces for teachers to be people that kids can and students can feel safe with. I know I've said safe 100 times, but I'm doing it intentionally, is really, really important. Having the training so that people feel a comfort level and a fluency about talking about these tough issues is really important, and doing this in some ways early on. You may not talk about sexual assault in junior high school health classes, but there are things that you can talk about in terms of, what's right and what's wrong, or what the kind of things, what saying no really means in lots of different situations. And we're pretty comfortable with talking about bullying, and what we need to do is just extend that out to assault.
And I would say, first of all, very well said, Randi Weingarten. And secondly, the only other thought I have is that you can model, for example, the ability to come forward, that in fact you can talk about these things, and that there should be no shame associated with it. The rest of us can model respecting you, publicly making it safe for someone like you to have told your story and to listen respectfully. And I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you about it on the show today. And before we go, I know we're running out of time. I also guess I would ask, there was a time in this nation, many decades in this nation, when people understood and saw the union movement as a leading force for social change and progressive ideas. And this is certainly a key part of that conversation. So is your organization has just came out opposing the nomination of a Wall Street banker, Antonio Weiss, to yet another government position. You yourself were arrested at protest regarding the death of Eric Garner at police hands. Do you see a return to that kind of progressive unionism in the near future?
Yes, I mean, I think that's what I think that's what we have to be about. Economic and racial dignity. The fight for economic justice, the fight for racial justice, it's as important today as it was in 1963 when the March on Washington was about economics and racial justice. The impairment of voting, the wage suppression, the racism that makes black men fearful of police officers who are about protecting our communities. We need to overcome these barriers, and so they're, in my mind, they're all the same struggle for decency and respect. The term, I say this as I've often said in the last few weeks. Cops are not our enemy. It's racism and bias. It's
right.
this fear that cops have, and that community has now. And so we have to be about fighting barriers, and racism and sexism are barriers. And part of what we try to do as an education union is that it's about creating that ladder of opportunity, economic and educational, that kids can then climb up, that working people can then climb up. It's not a hand out, it's a hand up. But most of us don't have individual power to do that. And so that's why unions are vitally important to create that collective power.
To create that collective power, and as the philosopher John Dewey said, to make sure that education teaches us to be better human beings and better citizens and not just better employees, right?
Exactly.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Randi. It's been a pleasure having you, and I hope you'll come back sometime. We've been speaking with Randi Weingarten, president of the American Federation of Teachers. We will be right back after this on the Zero Hour.